Alrighty, welcome back to 22-1 for PhDs with Ashley and Dave, where we spend 20 minutes sharing our two perspectives on building a successful industry career. And we leave you with one actionable step that can help you start preparing today. So today we're tackling another mindset shift for PhDs that they need to make when moving into industry. So the shift from this independence to interaction, shifting from working alone to working in a team.
Yes, another very important topic for PhDs to wrap their minds around. We are taught to be independent in academia, and that's actually a really good thing in many ways, right? It's the hallmark of a PhD is, wow, you accomplished something all on your own, typically. You solved a problem or discovered something nobody had ever done, and you did it by yourself. That is important. But so a founder of a company here in Boulder, Colorado, where I live, his name is Scott. He once said to me, he said, grad school in some ways prepared me for the opposite of the real world. It taught me to work alone. And I've realized in industry and as an entrepreneur in particularly, I cannot do everything myself. I have to break that habit. And that is because industry succeeds by interaction. It comes back to speed, which we talked about in the last one of these episodes. It's very slow to do everything yourself because you learn one thing and then you learn the next and you learn the next. Far faster is to build a team with a broad range of experiences, and that's how you move forward faster. That's why the interaction versus independence is so important.
Absolutely. Bringing back speed, bringing back this industry desire for speed. I think doing it in a team will definitely help you go faster. But I have to push back a little bit on this one, Dave, because I don't know about other PhDs, but I have a team-ish,
Mhm.
kind of. I have
Mhm.
collaborators. There are people that I call on for help. There are people who might do a part of an experiment for me. There are folks who produce papers with dozens, if not at least a handful of other authors. And so, how do you think about this being different from the collaboration that happens in academia on a daily basis?
Yeah, I do get that pushback now and then. I travel and speak at universities a lot, and they'll say, "Well, I work in a group, so I actually do, work on a team." And I mean, the first comment I'll make is, to the extent that you do actually collaborate with people, that you do practice interaction, that's awesome. But generally speaking, academia doesn't collaborate nearly as much. So I've heard some people say, well, academics only collaborate when they have to. But still, when I dig in, and especially somebody working on their PhD for that project, generally they agree, well, on my PhD project, though, I was pretty much solely responsible for everything. Contrast that with industry where you may have a subset of a project that is yours. Obviously, you will have a job and you will do whatever it is. There's a part that you do yourself, but the project as a whole almost always depends on multiple people doing their job, and you could not possibly do it all on your own. That really is the big difference. It's one thing to have other people around. They might help you now and then. You might write a paper together or somehow contribute, but that's different than the level of interaction that is so common in industry where everyone's doing their part and there is absolutely no way to succeed unless everyone does their part.
Okay, that really resonated. I appreciate you explaining the difference. I think that aspect of responsibility too really hit me. So anybody who I'm collaborating with, at the end of the day, this is my PhD project. I am responsible for whatever the outcome is, right? If their side of the project doesn't work, maybe I made the wrong hypothesis, right? And so we don't actually have equal stakes in the game. I imagine in industry, all of the teams working together are all invested in the outcome, or they're all invested in sort of working together to have the end product come to be. In my case, I know that the postdocs maybe that I work with, or the undergrads or technicians that work with me, they do care, but at the end of the day, I think I might have larger stakes in the PhD completion than maybe a lab manager or a technician. So um,
Yeah.
that aspect of responsibility is really interesting when it comes to sort of independence versus interaction and how much you just need the other teammates.
Yeah, I mean, if I think of, I imagine yours is the same way. Most PhDs are the same way. Even if we get a little bit of help, in the end, we stand up to defend our thesis all on our own. We have to answer whatever questions our committee asks. We have to be responsible for having, planned and done all of that. And that is really a big difference.
So we're talking quite a bit about sort of producing something and I guess executing, but part of the at least part of my PhD experience, I'd be really interested to hear about yours as well, but part of my PhD experience has been it's been a default of solo problem solving. So it's been there are people around you, there are folks who can help, but at the end of the day, it's my responsibility to figure it out. It's my responsibility to dive deeper into the issue and come out with some sort of solution. And so that's a mindset that I'm sure can stick with a lot of PhDs. So when you were in your PhD, did you have an experience like, did you also have this default solo problem solving?
Oh yeah, and an interesting question for me. I'm if I say, well, is it did the PhD groom me to think that way, or did I actually come in with a bit of that in the first place? I like to talk about their skills, their knowledge, and their attributes. These are all strengths we have. Some things are just part of us. We came in this way. Maybe there are things about who we are that kind of set us up to be able to complete a PhD because we were independent. I don't know which it is, but absolutely that was part of my PhD experience. I enjoyed that independence. I kind of relished it. It's part of my identity, and it's something I took out into industry. And there was a habit to it. We talk about a mindset shift. I mean, I still have a bit of that habit. It's hard to break of thinking, okay, I need to do this myself. Like I say, my identity, or if I'm going to be worthy of the degree, worthy of my job, worthy of being here, wherever that is, I better be able to do this myself. And, when you get into industry, that just doesn't work. In fact, maybe it would help to describe an industry environment and how very different it is, because a lot of people may not really understand. I know I knew nothing about industry before I went there. I just kind of imagined I'd be working on a research project, much like my PhD, maybe, but things are very different. So let's talk again about a product and development kind of environment, whether you're working on a product or not. I've worked on product development teams that will have people from many different functions, could be research, engineering, marketing, regulatory, manufacturing, and even within the engineering functions, there could be mechanical, electrical, software, optical systems. It's not at all as simple as having an experiment that is some way isolated to the problem I'm discussing, right? Whether it was my interferometer or with your mice, it's just much broader. There is simply no way one person could ever know enough about all those functions to do everything themselves. You could say, well, the CEO, the COO, some of the executives need to at least understand some of them, but nobody could actually function in all those different disciplines, those different areas that well. So that is really the big difference. To go back to, the initial pushback, well, hey, I do work with other people in academia. Sure, you might. And if so, that's great. And in a while, we're going to encourage people to look for those opportunities, but it's never as broad as in industry where these are just things you may know nothing about, right? And you're working alongside these people.
Seems like there's sort of a shift in ownership, sort of a my project that you do a lot in PhD world to our product, which is more of how it's going in industry. How was that for you? You've said that this mindset stuck with you for years,
Mhm.
and it's also something that was tied pretty closely to your identity. And so when you got into industry, especially we've talked about some of the managers not being super happy with their PhDs or their PhD stereotypes. So how was it for you to sort of, I guess, let that go and shift more to this interactive approach?
Yeah, it was definitely a struggle, mostly a mindset shift. That is always a challenge. What helped is I ended up finding that to be an exciting environment. I had to shift my mindset, so I wasn't thinking I need to do it all myself. And as I described, I mean, sometimes I just couldn't. There's no way I could know anything about the marketing or manufacturing. So two things really helped. One is I found it is really fun to be part of a team all working to accomplish the same goal. I found that very enjoyable. There's just something in the community of it. You're all doing your part. And as long as you have good team members, which if it's a good company, you should, that can be really fun. And that is exciting. You all win together. Again, to go back to the game analogy, soccer team, football team, winning a game is great. It's a collective effort. But the other thing I thought was really fun about that is I never imagined how interesting it would be to learn about all these different aspects of business. And working with these people gave me an opportunity to learn something about them. I didn't have to be the expert, I didn't have to do it, but I got to learn about it. And I found that to be interesting as I interview a lot of scientists for my books and things, and a couple of them have pointed out when I got into industry, I realized business is just another problem to solve. And as a scientist, I really enjoyed doing some of that. So those are those are two ways that really helped me with that mindset shift. There was a reward, if you will, for shifting to the interaction mindset.
As you were talking, I was thinking so much about sports. I was a soccer player growing up, and so when you score a goal, you turn around immediately and celebrate with your whole team. If I scored that goal and turned around and nobody was there, that would be a little bit sad. And so I think there is so much beauty in having a team around you to sort of maybe celebrate with or to go through some of the harder things with too. I think yeah, the sports really, really came to mind for me. And as you're talking about folks you chatted with for your books, the PhDs that I've talked to for the PhD Paths project, I asked them what their favorite part of their job is. Every time, every person, all 250 of those PhDs, and so many of them, so many. I wish I had an exact number because that would make this more exciting. But so many say that their favorite thing is the collaboration or the
Yeah.
people that they work with. It's just people, people, people. And
Yeah.
I feel like that might be a little bit of a different sentiment than in an academic setting. It is very much put your head down, get your work done, and it's on you.
Yes, and absolutely true. Here's another thought I had. So in the last episode, we talk about the challenge of making decisions, and you will have to make decisions when you don't know the right answer, and that's taking a risk. Well, the great thing about this interaction is even if you were the one that made the decision that chose what we were going to do, we're all involved in making that choice work out. And so if it doesn't work out, it's usually in a good company anyway. It's usually not the kind of thing where everyone turns and looks at you and says, "Oh, you screwed this up." We're aware you didn't know for sure. As long as we trust you as a team member, we know you did the best you could. We realized there was a risk, and we're all going to work together to try and fix it. This is not the kind of thing where you get all the blame. Again, there's always dysfunctional companies, dysfunctional teams, right? And you want to watch out for that. But so not only is there the celebration when you make a goal, but there is a reduction of the feeling of blame or shame or whatever when turns out you made a bad decision. Because hey, we're all in this together, and we can all find a way. I have help. If I made what turned out to be a bad decision, I have my members helping me figure out how do we recover.
Absolutely. This feels like sort of the embodiment of the shift from my project to our product. And that is
Right.
really cool. But
Yeah.
might I ask though, is it harder to make decisions if you have so many cooks in the kitchen?
So I can tell you as having been a leader, a manager in industry, ownership is really important. And not that everybody does things on their own, but if you break the decisions up and give people ownership and saying, okay, I need you to figure this out and make the decision and be
Mm.
responsible for it, it partitions things so that we're not stepping on each other's toes, maybe is what I think
Gotcha.
you're bringing up. How do we, if there's all these different decisions to be made, how do we even get started? Well, it's important in a team to give people different roles so that and ownership
Right.
of things and ownership. The way I look at it as a leader in industry is you say you look into this. You certainly talk to other people, gather all the information and opinions you want, but in the end, I need you to make the decision, be responsible for making the decision and owning the outcome. And again, you can get help from other people, but if you say it's your responsibility to do this, decide on this, give us your recommendation, somebody else has ownership of something else. If you do that well, that keeps it organized.
Okay, that totally makes sense. I imagine that not everybody has the same stakes in the decision or making the decision when you have different, maybe more of a little hierarchical structure there going on. So that totally makes sense. Delegation's important. Got it. Not
Right,
all the cooks are the main cook in the kitchen. So that
right.
makes sense. I think right now, though, thinking about how students can prepare in graduate school now or in their postdoc now, I think it sounds like a lot of these habits or a lot of the mindset shift can actually be brought into their own projects currently, right? If so, you might consider getting help from somebody
Mhm.
in a way that maybe gives them more ownership. How would you view ways in which a graduate student could incorporate some of this teamwork into maybe a current collaboration that they already have or that they want to build?
Yeah, that's exactly where what I recommend is look for opportunities to work more as a team, more than you do currently. Even if you already feel you collaborate, expanding that will always be good. That's the bottom line. Now, it may depend on how invested your PI is in this, and your advisor or whomever, however, whatever the structure is. I would suggest you might talk to them about, hey, most of us are going to be working in industry where interaction, collaboration, teamwork's really important. It would be great if we could find ways to practice this here without sacrificing the independent nature of a PhD. It might be that they would be on board and help you in figuring out how you could work out some really collaborative projects. If you don't get support from your PI, then you'll need to do it on your own. But, again, you could argue, well, the independence allows you to solve some of those problems you're on your own. And maybe you just say, you talk to some of your coworkers and say, hey, teamwork's really important in industry. Not only would it be good for us to develop this mindset, but telling stories is really important. And if we can tell stories during interviews when we're looking for a job about how we built some collaborations, that will really impress people in industry and it will make us stand out because I bet they don't hear that very often from PhD graduates, right? Recent graduates, things like that. So, however you do it, if you can enlist your boss, your manager, your PI, whatever the structure is, or if you need to do it on your own, that's a great way to move forward and look
I
for those
actually,
opportunities.
I mean, I actually think I would be hard pressed if there was a PI who was not excited about getting more data,
Yeah.
right? So all of the collaborations that I have had in graduate school, I have led, I have initiated, but all of them have led to more progress or more data that my advisor is excited about, right? And so I think that there really is a sell for this sort of endeavor in your laboratory, whether it's amongst your own lab or with other labs. If you couch it in data, right? Everything, we'll talk more about persuasion in another episode,
Mhm.
but I think that that is a great way to practice that. But it shouldn't take much if you have data and if you're working towards data, excuse me. But you can start reframing the way that you think about collaboration now in graduate school, right? Instead of just I got data, right? It's like, who helped me get here? Whose expertise moved this along? How many different teams and people with different expertise got together and worked as one, right? Is there somebody in computational science, somebody in systems neuroscience, somebody who's a physicist, right? An engineer? Are we bringing as many people and types of backgrounds together to sort of build your own team, even if it's not a formal team, but you're noticing that about your own collaboration? So even
Yes.
small things like helping someone debug code, giving feedback on a talk, or brainstorming ideas with someone can be seen as teamwork. And so,
Absolutely.
do you want to hop in then, Dave, on what this week's action is for folks and how they can start doing this right now?
Yes. So the action for this week is to track your collaboration. Write down all those moments in the past week where you've worked with someone else. It could be informally, it could be something an initiative that you took. Point is, look for opportunities, whether they were things that were already going to happen and you're just noting them and paying attention to when do I work with other people. Maybe it generates ideas about how you could push for more, but build a log so that over the course of a week, you can look back over how much collaboration did you do, and that will almost certainly give you ideas about how you might be able to grow it going forward. This will be valuable for helping you shift your mindset already. There's benefit in more collaboration, even in an academic setting, right? We can call these industry mindsets because they're required in industry, but there's often much value in bringing these mindsets into certain elements of academic research. So that will be a benefit. And as an absolute bonus, on top of all that, you will have great stories to tell about how you started to develop this interaction mindset while you were still a grad student.
Absolutely. I was just going to mention the power of stories. And I think awareness, being aware of the collaborations, being aware of the teamwork that you're doing allows you to create these better stories that you tell, whether it's in your job interview, if it's in a talk, if it's just meeting somebody for the first time. Stories are huge. So I really think this is doable for students. I think it'd be so beneficial to start working in this way. And I know it's a mindset shift and a practice that can be incorporated tomorrow. So I'm very excited for folks to start doing this now, turning their academic collaborations into sort of industry teamwork,
Yeah.
starting today. Very
Yeah.
exciting.
Really great opportunities, really great progress for everyone to make. Next week, our final episode of the series, we will talk about one of the most important strategies in industry, making progress by persuasion. That is also a big shift from what we're used to. So we will see you all then.